Welcome to the Great Distraction.
Hello, everyone. This is The Great Distraction, and today the topic of discussion is part of a new series we're introducing, Taboo. This one has to do with sex. My name is Ben, and with me today are my co-hosts Thomas,
How's it going?
Rick,
Hey, everybody.
and Glenn.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us. The Great Distraction is a podcast that focuses on a vast and random range of topics, and we hope that each episode leaves you with, if nothing else, a little something to ponder. As always, we'd love to hear from you. Questions, comments, and topic suggestions are always welcome. You can contact us on Facebook or via email at greatdistractionpodcast@gmail.com. Especially with these series topics, man, we would love to hear more ideas for either questions, comments, or whatever. If you got or suggestions too, because I mean we listed out these series and we have expanded. We have a number of topics in each series, and we want to keep them expanding. So if anybody's got, if you hear a series and you're like, oh, dude, I know a really good one you could add to that, let us know. We'd love to throw it in there. The Taboo series in particular, just to introduce it because it's the first one we've done from that series, is going to focus on things in society that are, well, obviously, generally taboo. Sex is an easy one, and we decided to start all of our series off with one of the most common or one makes most sense or most well-known, and sex is an easy one, especially in the American culture. And
What is it exactly?
I'm not really sure. I haven't had it in a long time. I almost forgot, right? So, so in this one in particular, we're going to be concentrating, as we do with most of our topics, on what people, Americans, would experience. None of us have really lived for a truly extended amount of time anywhere else, and we're all born here and in the U.S. So we don't even want to try and start to speak on other countries. What you read on the internet about what people say, people think and feel in other countries is not something I would want to base a fact or a topic on at all, because I don't really believe that's enough information to actually speak on what other people think, about certain topics. So we're just keeping this based in the U.S. Because that's what we know. So the question is, in this particular topic, is why is sex so taboo in the American culture? I wanted to start this off. We broke it up into basically, if you will, seed topics, little subtopics within this greater topic.
And the use of the word seed was why?
Was intentional. I'm trying to implant seeds in your minds
Through sex.
through sex.
Okay.
Today, yes.
Right.
So, but I wanted to start us off by discussing a little bit first, about how we're raised here in this country, because that I think really feeds into a lot of why we look at the rest of these things that we'll continue into the way that we do. And I don't want to speak for everybody here, but if your situation was different, add to it or subtract from it, one or the other. But as kids here, we're kind of taught at the very least to turn away from anything that's sexual. If you're flipping through the channels and you're 6 years old and there comes a commercial on there where there's for some reason a bunch of girls in bikinis, your mom might say, "Don't look."
Or turn your head.
Or they'll cover your eyes, right? So you have that. How do I want to say this? You have that mentality going towards something that is sexual in a good way. That's aside from all the sexist point of view that using women in advertising is. I'm not saying that's super positive, but it is at least a healthier introduction or a healthier experience or exposure. That's what I'm looking for, a healthier exposure to something sexual. What we do tend to promote to everyone in this culture is sexual abuse. And that blows me away, because for some reason it's okay. I'm not speaking for every family or whatever, but growing up the way I grew up, it was kind of okay to watch on TV on the news and hear about some sexual molestation case and things that happen, or you're watching a TV show that's probably a little too old for you, but it's on the air. And you'll see more things that deal with negative sides of sex than you will, and generally those are watched more than you will with actually people having sex. And that kind of...
Or do you mean like positive reinforcements of sexuality?
Yeah, well, so so if you turn on the news, what do you think you're going to hear more about?
Well, you always hear bad news because that's what keeps
okay. So
people
news
watching.
might be a bad example. Yeah. So and how many? It's again, most things focus on the negative side of things because it attracts your attention more. It goes for the wow factor, right? More, and that's how our wow factor I think works here is that we have a more focus on the negatives of a lot of things.
Well, I think one thing too is as parents in America, I think that either they find it harder to explain sex to their kids, so they avoid it because they've already grown up with that mentality.
Yep.
Which is
and so what that
bad,
leads to, right, is you end up creating growing adults that grow up or people that grow up, if not straight up being told sex is bad, they grew up. Well, this is something we don't talk about. Like that's something you turn your head away from.
It's made to be a big deal.
Yes.
Like it's the talk.
Yeah, the
Know,
talk.
right?
If you had the talk, I never had the talk, but if you have the talk, and I don't know. Again,
but you were going to have it once because it was so special and so amazing. You only have it once.
And I don't know how they handle it in other cultures or in other countries, but in ours...
Way different. Let's just leave it at that.
No. I mean, I was going to say, in our schools, usually about 4th, 5th, 6th grade, somewhere around there, which is like 9 to 11 years old, somewhere that age group, usually your school will have a sexual education class. And then there will be another, which will be like weeks long or maybe months long in junior high, which is our like 13, 14 years old. And then in high school, there's usually a health class that you take as a freshman.
Did you do stuff like that when
those
you were in
ones
school?
I did, yeah. I did all of those.
I had stuff like that in school
and
too,
usually,
but it was terrible.
Yeah, well, they're silly, but usually your parents have to sign for you to do that.
Oh, yeah,
and I think
a lot of them did, yeah.
I think a lot of parents use that as the cop-out, like, oh, they're gonna cover that in school for you. I don't have to talk.
That's a common misconception is that they're actually talking about that. I would categorize all three of those educational sessions as more health education than sex education.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They explain
herpes.
The risks of STDs. They
how to use a condom.
Show you what pregnancy looks like. I don't think
how to
they
do it.
Told us how to use a condom.
They did. I remember. Well, I mean, they're all different, but like, so I remember in 5th grade there was. I think what it was is they did an open Q&A and they all the boys could. So they separate the boys and the girls, by the way, when they're doing this most of the time. Not when you get in junior high and high school. A lot of times they're together. But when they were in elementary school, they separated the boys and the girls. And I remember they basically had gave us all little note papers. If you had a question, you could write down the question. You could basically anonymously ask the question. And I think that's where it was. One of the guys asked for how do you use a condom.
Okay, so that would have been helpful to do uniformly, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have that because we did have the anonymous questions as well.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And no one asked that question, so we didn't get that. It was more like diagrams of a cervix and stuff like that. It's like, I don't even understand what the fuck I'm looking at here.
Yeah, and on top of that,
never will.
Yeah. Or they talk about like, okay, guys, get ready. You're going to get hair in weird places.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and
like
your armpits are going to stink. It's going to be fine.
So again, it's not even a positive outlook on sex in general. They don't talk about anything pleasure related at all. It's not
more about the body, and that's why I agree. When I was in school, it was more like a health class.
Yeah, you're right.
They did cover like diseases and things like that, but it was more like your health.
Because sometimes, so the reason I brought that or thought about that is because sometimes they called it sexual education class or whatever. It's like, you're right, it's not. It's like a health class. It wasn't really.
That's what ours was called, a health class.
Didn't teach me how to please
basic
her.
biology.
Basic biology. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. So anyway, that's that.
I'd say if anything, it was more so reaffirming your previous conditioning that sex should be
hidden and talked about secretly,
steered away from. You guys don't get to do this until you get out of high school or even later.
And even then making the big deal about splitting up the children. Yeah. That's reinforcing that concept of this is a hidden topic. You don't talk about this with each other. It's
and worse than that, they barely even, I don't know, maybe your guys' experience was different, but they barely even talked about like girls' periods and stuff and like what was going on. They kind of did.
Yeah, they don't really tell the boys much about the girls.
No, it's
more of this is what your body's going to do and a base anatomy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that would have been second semester.
Yeah, part of that could be that women mature much faster than men do. So I don't know if the boys could handle that at the same level that the girls did at that time.
Or worse, they'd be turning around teasing the girls afterwards. Right? Yeah.
Probably I mean, we were doing that to each other. Imagine what would happen to the girls. Like, you're going to fucking die. You're going to bleed for 5 days.
She's already.
I'm going to stink, but you're going to be dead.
And then I remember like I remember one of the classes too. They had given, because I had a friend that was a girl that went to it or whatever, and she told me what they talked about or what, and they had given them like all pads, right, in case they started their period and whatever. And it's like all the girls kind of walk out of there like horrified. All the guys are like, oh, all right, whatever, this is weird, but it ain't that bad. The girls are like, holy shit, this is going to happen to me. Assuming it had not already started for them, right?
Well, here's a fucked up one. During your sex education stuff, did they ever like discuss like spontaneous boners?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember that one video with a guy with a kid standing. He has to put his hands in front of his crotch because he's like in choir singing, standing in front of everybody singing, and he has to like hide his boner. Yeah.
I didn't get that one. It would have been fucking helpful. It's really hard to conceal a hard-on in typing class.
Shit, dude, that's hilarious. It's like somebody should have dropped me a dime on that one, dude.
Yeah,
like,
I thought I was gay for a little bit. It's like, I'm getting a boner, and there's a male teacher here. It's like, what is wrong with me? I didn't know that it just happens.
Yep.
Or maybe I wasn't paying attention that day. I don't know. I was one of those
jerking off in the corner.
Yeah, probably trying to hide my boner in my belt. Blew a load in my belly button.
Well, I know how to get rid of this at least. Oh man. Wow. So that's how we're raising the U.S.
There's a prime example of the American man, right?
Talk to your kids about spontaneous boners, and you won't have to get the cum crust out of his belly button.
Too much.
Cum crust, I love it. That and I never had. I know I realize it's kind of getting off topic here. I never had the whole wet dream thing that they talked about either. So I was like, I never really dealt with that. But I mean, when I heard about it, I was more horrified than when I was like, shit, that happens. Like, damn, that's gonna suck. That'll be embarrassing when mom finds the stiff sheets, So yeah, thankfully. But anyway, okay. So let's go on to the next section here. One of the interesting things, and again, speaking only for the U.S., I don't know what it's like in other countries, but there is definitely a strong difference between the taboo-ness, if that's a word, of male versus female sexuality. It's here. It's extremely more, and we were discussing before we started recording. It is changing rapidly these days, but for as long as America's been, female sexuality is way more taboo than male. And since we were talking about how we grew up, when I was young, I grew up thinking like, I don't know, maybe like 6, 7, 8, something like that. I actually grew up thinking that girls didn't like sex, and then it was the guy's job to like make them or trick them into doing it. Like you had
to woo them.
You had to do something to it. Like they just didn't like it. They weren't interested.
You already had a job. You're not even 12 years old.
Right. And then the next thing was
a job that you're going to suck at for the rest of your life.
Wow.
And I didn't have any money, so I was like, oh shit, we need money too, right? So they're never going to like me.
You need 2 jobs.
So, I mean, and for some reason, that seems to be another example of that is the promiscuous nature. If a female is promiscuous, she's treated way worse than a promiscuous male. Mm-hmm. I mean, the slut shaming is like a real fucking thing here, and yeah, I mean, it's totally negative against girls. But guys can go around and fuck anything they want, as many people as they want, do whatever, and then talk about it and joke about it, and it's okay. It's humorous. Even other girls will laugh about that sometimes, depending on if it's a friend or whatever.
I think that's a holdover of the male ego.
And male dominance.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. From a patriarchal society.
It's definitely changing too, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And you can see that in other cultures too. I don't want to name specifically the cultures that I've dealt with and seen this happen, but very much where women will stay covered up, not showing, no sexuality, doesn't matter what you want, and you will only marry and have sex with somebody of this same race, but I can go out and fuck whatever race I want. It's okay. I can do whatever. I don't want to marry him. I just want to have sex with him. And then whatever. There's a double standard there, like crazy in male-dominated cultures. And as we move away from that, that's definitely changing. I've experienced it for sure here that women are becoming much more open-minded and considered. Society's becoming much more open-minded about what is acceptable that females do with themselves sexually. Definitely changing. But it's interesting to think about because for the majority of, I think, all of our lives, it was not like that. That's still kind of new.
Well, I mean, America is a very male-dominated, culture in general.
Where isn't, though?
Well, yeah, it's true. I mean, yeah.
But that's changing worldwide. And one of the aspects is changing is female sexuality and the openness that it can be in public. Girls can talk about multiple partners or just their own sexual preferences and sex in general. Like they weren't even, most of the time that was taboo for them to even say that they. That's why I got the impression that damn, girls don't even like sex. Like, what the hell?
That was the thought I had when I was growing up. But I think the sexual revolution in like the '60s in Western culture had changed a lot of that.
To where those ideas spread to, right? They still did a good job of keeping that hush-hush to their kids.
Definitely, right? But it would have been like our parents or maybe some of the listeners' grandparents that would have been young people during that era that were kind of the spearhead, for lack of a better term, of changing public perception of the woman's sexuality.
Well, I think it also ties into like equal rights too. I mean,
that's true.
I think look at the '60s and the way we were changing the way we viewed women in general, and they were winning more battles in the social status of being more of an equal citizen, and I think that changes that conversation too, because now you're not like, if you go back to say like the 30s, 40s, whatever, in a more dominated male world, it was like, the guy can be a little harsh or slap a woman on the butt at work and not get in trouble. It was very tipped scale, and because of the fight that women have gone through and worked on and won since that time, I think the sexuality thing is changing a lot, and as a result of that.
Yep, definitely proportionally related there. Okay, next little tidbit. Let's talk about marketing and advertising.
Sex sells.
Sex sells, but okay, so that's one of the interesting things I was thinking about with this one. So when we say that, what I think of, first thing I think of is things like a half-naked girl selling beer, or a half-naked guy selling perfume to girls, or some other toiletry like Axe spray always uses, for example, the deodorant always uses some half-naked person, be it a guy or a girl. But that is... I'm okay. So, would you guys agree that that's usually how our "quote unquote" sex sells is used?
I agree. One of the things I was going to say about this topic was I've noticed in advertising, because we've had tons of conversations about this before. I feel like when they do even a sex sells kind of thing for women, selling a product to men, it's easy to throw a beautiful woman in there, sexy dress, maybe showing some skin, maybe a bikini, whatever. But I feel like when they show the guy, he's normally like in a tailored $10,000 suit.
Yeah, or shirtless in a pool or something like that.
Yeah, I feel like
usually
it's more
suits.
I feel like it's more like suit and dressed up and like, look how perfect.
How much money
he's
I have
put together and he's presenting himself.
So, but the reason I bring that up is because I think that perception, and it goes into men and women. Like men are visually stimulated, women are emotionally stimulated. I think in relationships that I've been in most of my relationships.
I believe that from girls that I've been friends with or whatever. They don't seem to get excited about just by looking. But I got to talk to him and
Oh, he's cute or whatever.
It's like, I saw her and she's hot. I'm down.
Yeah, but but guys will go stupid about anything.
Yes, absolutely.
But I think that also ties into the advertisement. I see it in the advertisement.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so were you going to say something, Rick? Sorry.
I was going to say that. That is essentially the desired result in anything that they're marketing, right? If you're going to acquire something, will this attract the opposite? Will this attract me a mate, whether they be the opposite sex or not? We're talking about sex here, so then it could be like Thomas was getting at. Men are visually stimulated, so I want to see more of the skin of my target mate, right? Whereas like women are more emotionally stimulated, so they're targeting the security, whether it be financial or physical security, in their mate. So when they're producing advertising geared towards women, the male
successful
counterpart, will look like he's wealthy or big and strong to kind of attract that. And the woman in that advertisement will be sexy and kind of showing her curves or whatnot, attracting his attention.
Open dress. It might be a classy dress, but it's open all the way through the front.
Right. Walk by and catch the guy's attention, and that's what they're looking to get from the other side. So yes, I totally agree that sex sells in advertising, and it's the oldest trick in the book.
So the other side of that, reason I brought this one up, is that while we all agree sex sells, however, what I noticed though is that the way we use it is usually showing like what you guys just described. We don't really show people having sex in advertising.
Fade to black.
Here.
Well, we're just talking about here in America, yeah. So that I've always found interesting is that you can show a half-naked girl or a half-naked guy, but you don't usually see two
it's implied.
you don't really see implied too often either. Like think softcore porn, basically. That's what I'm surprised we don't see.
You want more of that in your advertising?
I do want more. On my drive home from work, yes, I want to see her bent over dog. No.
I would pay a lot more attention to this advertising if it was closer to softcore porn.
But I think it's funny because we say sex sells, but and yes, obviously the motivations behind why that those images attract our attention is sexually based, but we don't actually seem to use visually stimulating sexual imagery.
You don't need to go that far.
I guess you're right.
I think
but
it's
I'm
back
surprised
to
that we haven't.
I think what Rick was said. It's implied. It's the way the story is presented, or the way the scenario is presented. It's implied.
Right. You're building the idea of the chase. You are setting up a scenario in your advertisement that it's a successful attracting of a mate.
Yeah. But
so it's not the act of sex that is selling. It is that.
To get there.
Exactly.
But I think that goes back into our culture, what we've already been saying about how we don't really talk about sex.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's implied, and you show this is, by having that diamond ring that the little kids slaved over and the fancy car, you got laid.
Yep.
It's implied. Look,
or you're going
welcome to America.
Is that all I need?
Fast car and a diamond.
And it's also illegal in this country to show too much of certain parts of anatomy
which
when
is rich.
children
Retarded.
and it's if children are able to see it. Right. So if a consenting adult goes into an establishment where they're going to verify that you are of age and you know what you're getting into, you could then, I imagine, find advertising that would show you sex to sell something, like maybe in a sex shop or something like that. They would have a nude model holding a dildo or something. I don't even know.
do.
But right. Okay. So in that case,
Been a couple weeks since you've been in one.
In that case, it would show more of the sexual acts that you were getting at, but we make it illegal here in this country, in this culture, to where children may have access to it, or someone that won't want to see that is sheltered from it.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think that's where that comes from, and that's why it's implied. So it's elusive enough that children don't get it, but adults know what's happening when that lady leads the man by his tie into the other room.
Yeah, but they don't have to explain it. It goes back to when we were saying before about having the talk and how like the schools did the talk for the parents because nobody really wanted to talk about sex. It's like we really want to imply it, but we really don't want to get too deep into explaining anything.
Right.
It's like I feel like it's hiding from it.
Yeah.
Is the bigger topic.
Okay, when you guys said sex shop and implied and advertising, this I got this popped into my head. So one time I'm in a sex shop and I'm at the register and I turn to look to the right and there's this huge like 3 foot by 4 foot poster of this very muscular guy, naked but turned. You can't see his dick, but you can see his like bare butt, and he's holding and another guy is standing next to him, and together they're kind of like holding like if you would like we're holding a bouquet of flowers type thing. This bottle of Astroglide. And the guy, so as I'm going up to the register and I'm putting my stuff on the counter there, and I kind of look over and I see this thing to the right, this big ass poster right next to the register, and I look back, and sometimes some people are. I think at that point I wasn't really that comfortable with it, so it was already an awkward situation anyway, right? I don't even remember what I was buying, but I look up to the guy working behind. Oh, it was a girl. The girl working behind the counter, and she kind of smiles a little bit. I look back over at the poster and look back at her, and she says, "I know." She says, "I put that there intentionally to see the reactions that people get."
That's awesome.
Yeah, dude.
The implications.
Right. I have a friend who works at a sex shop in San Diego, and they do all kinds of stuff like that just to mess with people's heads.
Because they're bored.
They're bored. Yeah, I was on tour one time in the '90s, and we were in New Orleans. And you go to New Orleans, there's sex shops all over the French Quarter and stuff like that.
Okay.
And we had a drummer at the time who was obviously not very comfortable with any sort of sex conversation. We learned that from this experience. And we go in, and there's sex everywhere in New Orleans. I mean, you're seeing posters. You see, like Budweiser has the girls, they have the guys there. And being from the Midwest, I think for some of the people I was in the band with, that was like the first time they'd seen that. So like publicly, and so we're going to all these sex shops. So we walk in this one, and it's the standing there display, and it's a guy in a leather suit, and he's got a dildo sticking out.
Nice.
Like a parrot beak?
Yeah. the dildo mouthpiece.
Good old face fucking.
Yep. Wow. Sounds messy.
I just laughed my ass off, man. I couldn't help it.
That's actually a good segue to this next little mini topic I want to talk about, because now we're starting to get into the primitive nature of some of these things, right? And why all we need is an implication, an implied, and with the rest, our brains figure out the rest of it with our own creative minds due to our primitive drives.
We're all sex driven.
That's it. Let's talk a little bit about anthropological points here. There was an article I was reading when I was researching for this topic. I ran across this, and it had it was from an anthropologist. It had a really interesting, unique angle of a possibility of one of the reasons that they believed sex was so taboo in our nature. And it was something along the lines of this, and it was that it reminds us of our basic human needs. And when you remind people of their primitive drives and their basic human needs, you begin to they can get to the point where they start to, it breaks down that they are more primitive than they like to think of themselves. There are many we'll call them organizations that promote in this world and in this country that human beings are somehow better than animals, and that we should hide from or ignore our primitive drives. And when people who were raised with that mentality start thinking of their own primitive drives and human needs, it can induce guilt and confusion because they don't know how to deal with that stuff. They were raised that they were above that, and that didn't actually affect them. Well, when it's shoved in their face, that they are not above that, and that drive is there and will not go away, it can be very disconcerting and unsettling if they've never dealt with it before,
especially for adolescents.
Yeah, and it's a huge reminder right up front there, right in your face, that we are not in total control of ourselves or our primitive drives. Now, the anthropologist, I messed that word up, went further on this topic and went to extend it. They said they were saying once one starts down that path of questioning their primal nature, inevitably they end up questioning tying it to questioning their own mortality and death. So now you've taken something as simple as, wow, I don't know why I want to go over there and have sex with that person, to, holy shit, I'm not as godly snowflake as I thought I once was, and I'm going to die. You make those connections, and you're not in a great place.
And that is the whole purpose of sex at all, is because we are going to die. It's our method of propelling ourselves forward into the future when our husk is used up.
Passing on your genetic seed, and so it is associated with death. But that's what I thought was so interesting with this is that, I guess, actually, it makes more sense to me if I say it like this: sex creates life. Life is the extension of death, or the opposite. So you can't have life without death. You can't have death without life, and therefore you cannot have sex without life, and whatever. You know what I mean?
Without death.
You know what I'm going with that.
But by creating life, you are also creating death.
Indeed.
Because whatever you're throwing forward has to die, too.
They are obviously yin and yang, connected.
Yin and yang.
What are you doing with your wang? Got a little yin in there?
Wang?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Interesting little tidbit. Term for orgasm in French, la petite mort, means little death.
There you go. Little
Petite mort?
Petite. La petite mort.
Oh, la petite mort.
The little death.
Wow.
Next time I have sex, I'm gonna tell her you're gonna
I'm gonna
die
kill
right
you
now.
just a little bit.
Kill you. You're gonna little die if I do
I'm
it
gonna
right.
give you a little death.
If I do it right. Damn.
I wonder if that's how they keep kids from doing it.
Ooh, that could be some
you don't want a
crazy
little
folklore
die.
that they develop to scare kids.
You only got so many of those in your body.
Wow.
You blow them all in one shot.
Wow. Little death, dude. That's gonna stick with me now. Better than sticking on me though. So let's.
Apparently, crusting up in your belly button.
Oh, dude, that was a good one too, huh? That was another gem from the mind of Ricker. Okay, let's move to another one here. Another interesting point that people were making. So some of this was gleaned from papers, some of it was gleaned from articles, some of it was gleaned from research, some of it was gleaned from just straight up looking at huge Reddit threads where people were just having a philosophical conversation like we do all the time here, right? And I really appreciated those ones the most because it was just like an open forum of people coming up with their own creative ideas. And since there's really no there's no answers for any of this, it's just kind of a philosophical discussion, not even a debate. Nobody's really debating it. Sex is taboo here.
It's the master debate.
It's the nice. And go away, I'm baiting. So one of the suggestions somebody made was that, and I think there is some historical proof to this. I just did not look it up myself. Was that the one of the reasons it was beneficial for societies to make sex taboo is because for purposes of disease prevention. If everybody was out and an attempt to help save the populations, if everybody's out fucking everybody, you start and somehow an STD gets introduced into the society, it starts spreading rampantly, and they didn't have cures for it back then. So if you let promiscuity, take over your people, you might all die of syphilis, and they didn't even know what the hell it was or whatever. Name some other STD, that might have been around hundreds of years ago. So there was that concept. I thought that was kind of cool. Another one that kind of ties with that, again, in controlling the population and keeping your society up and running, was actually proving paternity. And from what I read, I did not read into which historical counts this may have come from, but kind of as part of a population control by governments, some governments had to introduce a level of tabooness for sex so that they could just keep in track of who was the father of who.
Were these mostly societies with a patriarchal hierarchy?
I don't know. It didn't list any of them out.
I know. I wonder if they were trying to keep genealogy or just like general human tracking information.
Somebody that's a hereditary lineage.
Could have been racial too.
The clergy.
Yeah, it could have been racial too. We want trying to keep everybody the same race. There's lots of reasons why they might have done that. But in order to prove, that was one of the grounds, was to prove who the father was of someone. If you have...
You're supposed to take him on the Maury show.
Yeah, that's it. That's how you prove it. I wonder if back then did the Greeks have a Maury show in the Colosseum?
Had a version.
Now who's the father here? Which gladiator knocked this chick up?
They checked out the cart wheels, traced it down.
Jeez,
it was your horse that ran through here.
That's weird. Okay, next tidbit. Interesting ties to sex to love. They really don't, in my opinion, have anything to do with each other. However, obviously there are ways that we all know that they are tied together, they're attempted to be tied together, and whether or not that works, I guess that depends on the individuals who are attempting to make that work. Well,
you can have love without sex and sex without love.
There you go. So
this is true, but I think that so love is like a very complicated emotion, right? And there are several stages to it, right? Just like grief. And in the earlier stages of love, there's like physical attraction and lust, right? And lust is what we associate most closely with the sexual acts, right? So I would say that in sex, or like you're getting to making love, you're getting into those early stages of love that would then mature potentially into a more mature or developed love that would be more long-lasting, like we commonly think about in our culture as love, what love is or what it means. Whereas having sex is a very early stage of love in like the lust phase. That's how I think of it.
I gotcha, and I thought it was kind of weird too that we make that we one of the terms for having sex is making love too. Mm-hmm. Like so which is bizarre because I don't really feel that society thinks that making love is actually, or having sex is actually turning a relationship into love.
Right,
and so that's kind of playing off what you were.
But after you meet someone new and you start getting through all like the earlier stages of the relationship, once you have sex with them, it does kind of create stronger emotions, right? And definitely more so in the women than in the men. It does become stronger.
During orgasm, there are actually a hormone that's released that catalyzes that emotional development.
Right. So I think that would kind of lead into what it is you're saying, where making love is that chemical release, whether it be dopamine or whatever it is that you're getting into.
I also kind of think to note was kind of funny. It's kind of odd to think about is that even when people are in a relationship, they're in love with each other, and society, and they're like publicly so. So like everybody around them knows that they're in love. It is still taboo to talk about their sex life, and so there really isn't a stage at which even if you're married and you have children, you're still not supposed to talk about your sex life.
I think that kind of tails into our body images in this country.
How so?
I'd totally go with that one.
Expand.
Well, we tend to be really reserved. We don't undress around each other. There's no public bathing. That's a thing in a lot of cultures.
That's a good point. Yeah.
Family
We're very
units.
frigid people.
We don't. I mean, how many people in your household walk around nude? That's pretty commonplace in other countries.
Right, and I think that comes from the original pilgrims into the United States were Puritans, and I think that stems from a lot of that.
Goddamn religion.
Our view
We'll
on
get to that
sex and sexuality of like our human body, like you were saying, and even like alcohol consumption.
So
stem
in
from
our
that.
daily lives, not even with any sexual expression, we are reserved, we are shy, we are bottled up, we are non-expressive. So when you get into a subject like sex, where it is a more intimate connection and we are conditioned to be reserved, it just compounds the issue.
Agreed.
I like it.
But I think going back to that image thing, I mean, in America, in our culture, we're very image-oriented, and only the beautiful have sex,
Right.
not the ugly people.
Because we don't want to imagine the ugly people having sex. That's terrible.
Or your parents.
But it's just your grandparents. But it goes
What
back.
has been seen cannot be unseen.
Right. See, exactly. That's what.
That
So you
scene-
don't want to hear them talk about it.
that
Right?
scene- that
You want to
scene-
go to Thanksgiving, hear your mom and dad talk about getting it done in the garage.
That scene in F is for Family.
If you guys haven't seen F is for Some Family, it fits right
He
up in
comes
this.
rolling out from under that bed.
Dude, you can't unsee that scene, dude. And you feel how terrible that kid felt. Getting stuck under the bed, hiding under the bed, and his parents are banging on top, dude. Wow. F is for Family is a wonderful show. I should have moved this up before the ties to
Hold
love.
on, I think you were getting at that the connection between love and sex wasn't really there. Now there were some opposing perspectives on that I wanted to get into.
Shoot.
Oh, what was it? Say it again.
Oh, shit. I got totally distracted now when we started
too.
talking about F is for Family.
Yeah, me too.
What he had mentioned earlier, the disconnect between sex and love.
Yeah.
I gave my opinion and no one else gave theirs.
Oh.
Well,
How do you guys feel about that?
I think in our society, and I've said it before, I think men use love to get sex, and women use sex to get love. It's like, have you ever heard the phrase "being guy for a bi"? It's just a way.
being bi for a guy.
Bi for a guy.
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
It's just a way that people socialize sometimes to get what they want. You know, I mean, I think everybody's looking to be happy or to be loved or be included or be special, you know, and being in a relationship or something. A lot of people view it as like, this is my ultimate love. I'm taken care of. Somebody cares that I'm alive. You know, I'm a part of something bigger. And that's more of a love direction, I think, and that's a way women look at relationships a lot more than men do as well. Men are just sperm donors in the world. That's really all we are.
We're the disposable units.
Absolutely.
We're the soldier ants.
We're the batteries and the dildo.
Hey, don't talk about my unit.
But also the consequences are
You know
much
you
more
like it.
severe for the woman than for the man, right? If we are gone, they're still stuck with the offspring if there is
A
one.
heavier burden
Yeah.
and just basic survival.
That's a lifetime commitment.
Absolutely.
Fucking A. All right, I should have brought this one up when we were talking more about why governments or controlling entities might be why it might benefit them to keep sex taboo. And one of that is another side of that is that I wanted to add to that was population violence control. If sex isn't kept taboo to some degree, promiscuity can become rampant, and people will fight as a result of that. And a couple of examples of that. If you have ever experienced or heard a story or seen a movie or whatever that has hinted at somebody, a couple partaking in group sex, or nowadays what's very popular is open relationships. I know a few people who have tried the open relationship thing and even trying to get into the three-way love triangle, and only to find out that once they tried it, it was all well and good until one or the other saw their significant other with somebody else. Doesn't work. All of a sudden, there's jealousy, there's anger, there's hurt, there's not good feelings. If you let this run rampant throughout a whole population, it can lead to a whole lot more of that. Examples of that kind of stuff is just thinking about what lust can lead a man to do. Basically make a male go crazy. And I'm sure I don't think it's, with women, it's been allowed to go to the same extent, because over the course of history, women have not led armies or led countries or things of that nature. But, I mean, how many wars or battles have been fought even over a woman by men? Men will fight, I should say males, because in this case, isn't even just a human thing. Males will fight for the right to mate with particular females or a female, in most species. And when you think about times of war or rioting or apocalyptic conditions, generally it's the men who are raping and looting during those times. I don't think there's too many women running around trying to ride a dick when they're taking over a culture or a society.
I think biologically, the warrior model has been more a male-dominated role in all societies, even in other animals, right? So the violence portion falls more on the male side, and the nurturing portion of our community falls more on the female side.
Absolutely.
And I'd say that's why.
That's why we're the disposable ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we're built for it.
Yeah. So you can. From that, I could kind of extract that. Yeah, it would probably benefit keeping the peace essentially by as that being a result of keeping sex a little more taboo. If people are allowed to fuck all they want and whoever they want, they actually can't handle it. It ends up going wrong.
You get people that are like trying lay claim on another person. You're like, hey, this is
my,
back off. This
my
is
female.
my territory.
Yeah.
And,
we get very primal real quick.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it very interesting that they would connect violence to having too much sex, but it does make sense also that would be a decent way to control people, because then you could get them to work, to collect resources, to find a mate, and then now you've limited your sexual exclusivity to one partner, reducing violence with other competitive partners, and
reducing disease and everything
STDs.
else too.
Yeah, I find that very interesting.
Next tidbit. Let's talk a little bit about religious history, because this is probably one of the biggest proponents of why sex is viewed in this country the way it is. America has a very strong foundation of Puritan, Christian, and Catholic belief systems. And those systems are very notorious for using a lot of things, but let's say primitive natures and primitive drives within humans for mental or discipline control to actually strengthen faith, focusing on the spirit, they call it, or it has been called, or whatever. I'm sure every iteration of these religions uses different terms for it, but if these things are not talked about because they're kept taboo, they remain sort of a mystery, and they kind of become an internal battle in each person. For which, when they go to their leaders, the solution offered is usually something to the effect that will strengthen one's faith. Go in the corner and pray, or go beg for forgiveness for your sinful thoughts, or whatever. They use this to further strengthen their religion within the individual and thus control the individual.
By punishing somebody from their basic nature.
That's right.
Yeah, and you exclude them from the group.
That's right. When in reality, all they need to do is go have sex or do something related to what their body was designed and meant to do in the first place. So that is a strong issue, and in my opinion, one of the biggest drives for the reasoning for keeping sex taboo and why we are where we are today.
Well, it's control, man.
It's definitely control, but worse than that, it's control as well as proliferation of their belief system. It's great, and they do it with a lot of other things too. But we're just talking about the sexual nature at this point.
Yeah, it's a great way to control people if you withhold their most primal urges, and you allow it if they kind of fall in line with what it is that you're looking for out of them. I think that by putting people in this kind of pressure cooker, like withholding all of these things and expecting them to stay in step, can be very dangerous. Kind of think about like
repression.
Back to adolescence, right? You're going through a lot of things that are new thoughts and feelings and what emotions that you've never been exposed to before. You throw that in there, and you've got this sexual repression going on, and your parents aren't talking to you about it, and then you send your kids off to college. And that's how you wind up with college towns like Chico, where they're trading STDs like a funny meme, because no one talks to them about it, and they've been in this pressure cooker, and then they're set free in a place to make adult decisions and do adult shit, and no one's watching them or watching out for the consequences.
I mean, as we've talked before, even like alcohol, you restrict somebody till they're 21, you're just winding the rubber band.
Prohibition doesn't work.
Yeah, until you get, and sex is definitely the same way in America. And, and you look at, a prime example, when you're a kid and you're going through adolescence and stuff, and you don't really know much about the world in general, and now all this shit's happening to your body, it's freaking you out or scaring you, and you're hearing all these things, and you were over here playing with trains, change. Now you got a random boner, so you're like trying to figure out how to get through life, and you're confused. And yeah, but no, I feel like in America, there's never, at least in my experience with schools and parents and everything, nobody's really been very open about, hey, just like it's okay to talk. Like, it's okay to ask questions. And I don't know very many kids or people in general that have ever said that, when they were growing up, their parents, yeah, you can talk to me about anything.
Yeah.
Not many.
Where did kids get the talk from typically?
Right? Either they just, some random friend tells them something, so you're learning bad information about how to do things, so you're making bad decisions. And I've argued forever, if we educated children, and I think it's an easy argument, if you educated children about being a human first, and understanding what your body does, what it is. Hey, son, that's a penis. Hey, these are what these are. You look at your arm, and hey, there's all kinds of games you got. This finger and this finger, this finger. What about the two things hanging down here? Yeah. Let's not talk about them. Well, what are they? Am I the only person on earth that has one? I mean, kids have those questions.
What do I do with it?
Yeah, right. And so I think that if we could transfer even earlier on, just being more honest about the human body. With children, I think it would cut out a lot of those questions because you understand yourself better. And then we could approach sex after that.
But this country is very, very sensitive about the children.
Oh, yeah.
And
got to save the children.
Right. But you also have, there are sexual predators out there that we are, I feel like the small group of people that have abused have created a stigma, I suppose, and anything that is, if you're to have a sexual conversation, or a conversation about sex with somebody underage, it becomes a big ordeal because of these people that are. So rather than being able to educate, it becomes awkward and strange and weird.
And that kind of comes full circle to what I was saying too, is the only sex we get on public, TV or talk about is bad shit. That's all they ever talk about is bad sex stuff.
But, like I was saying before, if you started out just teaching children and humans about their human body earlier, you might have kids that were way more willing to go, whoa, whoa, whoa at 5. You don't need to be putting your hands down there, Bishop.
Right.
Bishop?
Or make better decisions with what they do with it when, they start exploring their partners in high school or whatever.
Yeah, right. But I think the health thing, because like when I was, my brother has a couple kids, and I remember it was funny, but it's, I guess he handled it well. My brother's been a really good dad. His kid one time when he was like 2 or 3 was just like infatuated with this thing where the pee comes out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen
what
that
is it?
I've seen that before with kids.
It just goes nuts, and you're just like, well, yeah, welcome to the world, And if you, I think, and
welcome to the rest of your life. You'll be playing with that motherfucker
trying to
until you're dead.
But if people had more of a conversation and said, oh, don't, and did, but it's, I feel like everybody, especially, I don't know, I think a lot of people are very prudent about life in general, and like prude about life, and so they just, this whole conversation, even with little kids, I feel like they're just like, oh, I don't want to say that. Like, well, they come up with these crazy names for what your body parts are and stuff. I mean, like, come on, I feel like if we're just honest about the human body and our humanness,
and open about it,
make it not a big deal, and it won't be a big deal.
That's it. Prohibition doesn't work,
right? Sexual prohibition
in anything. Okay, let's move. There was the last one I had here, second to last, was the psychology behind the use of sexually related terms and phrases. Because this has always kind of confused me, and maybe I'm making more of it than it really is, but I always kind of thought it was weird how we have these double, like the extremes on both ends for double meanings for certain sexual terms. And the example, we were actually discussing this before we started recording, the first one I've got up here was fuck you versus fucking. It's like one can be used. I mean, I know it can be used as like a joke to your buddies too, but it can also be a hate, thing like, hey, fuck you, man. But you can also say, my girlfriend and I are fucking, like, okay, that's.
I hope you don't have time to talk about it.
Right? You guys doing it right now? What are you talking to me for?
Right.
Yes. So I mean, that's kind of a double standard on that word or whatever.
It's like a double entendre.
Okay.
But earlier we were talking about the root of that phrase.
Oh yeah. So okay. So I thought that was really funny. I for some reason I was looking up the origin of the word fuck, and everything I read kind of leaned to the same belief, and then is believed to have originated from an Indo-European word that meant to strike, like as in hit. Like what the hell?
So if you're gonna fuck that, you're gonna hit that.
You're gonna hit that,
right? or you know you're gonna fuck somebody. You're gonna punch them. You're gonna strike them
and fuck them up.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
It's a physical altercation.
So is sex. Okay.
Hey, some like it rough.
Interesting. And then another example was screw you and screwing, kind of along the same exact lines. But again, a screw is neither of those things. Right. A fuck is, I don't even know what a fuck is. Damn, I just admitted that.
He can't give a fuck because he don't even know what they are.
Brutal. All right. And the last little thing I wanted, unless anybody had anything else to add to that.
No.
All right.
Crickets.
Yeah, me neither. The last thing I wanted to go over that I thought would just be humorous to add in here for your personal enjoyment was I thought I'd see if any website had a list of slang terms for sex, because I thought that might be humorous. Since we're talking about how taboo this is, let's make an effort to untabooize it, if that's a word.
Decriminalize it. Let's
decriminalize it by laughing at some stupid terms for it, right? So here we go. I'm not going to read the whole list, but I highlighted some of the gems in here. Going balls deep, banging, boning, bumping uglies, to dip one's tip, get guts, get laid, get lucky, get one's tip wet, hide the sausage, hit it, hot beef injection.
Nice.
So there's this one. I actually discussed this one with the guys. I thought it was freaking weird, and it must not be something in our culture or our country here because I had never heard of it before. But I thought it was funny. And so this is a term for sex. A bit of who's your father. I'm going to go out and get a bit of who's your father. So when the guys heard it, they came up with, I wonder if that's where who's your daddy came from.
Or if there's some sort of correlation there.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that's connected to it. So whatever a bit of who's your father is, and maybe if you guys have traveled to another country, you know where that comes from. We're thinking like British, somewhere in Europe. I don't know. That's just weird.
Yeah, it sounds kind of British.
So continuing on, horizontal refreshment.
I like that one.
Weird, right? Make whoopee. Pound the duck. I didn't
Pound
get
the
that.
duck?
Why is it a duck?
Poor duck.
All I can think of is duck sex, and if you're bored, YouTube duck sex.
Really?
It's ridiculous, dude. They beat the hell out of the girls.
Dude,
They drowned her. It's horrible.
It's straight up rape.
It's fucking rape. It is bird rape. It's duck rape. Screwing. Sexy time. Shagging. Tap that ass. Tap an ass. Trim. This is actually one I learned of recently.
Trim?
Trim. I guess trim is
That explains a lot.
Right? Does it? So is trim the act of sex, or is trim a nickname for a vagina?
It's
both.
Vagina.
It's vagina.
No, it's
Getting
a-
vagina. That's
yeah.
okay. So okay, I'd never
Some
heard
trim. You ever heard getting some trim?
not until I heard an Atmosphere song not too long ago. It was called Trim. I love the song, and I was like, why the fuck is this song called Trim? So I had to look up Urban Dictionary. What is trim? Oh, okay. The song. Okay, interesting.
Slang,
The
man.
more we know.
The more. It's very useful information here. I can't believe I made it through life without knowing what trim was.
Well, it's all going to change from this point forward.
I think it's an East Coast thing, personally, because I never heard that from around
I've
here.
heard it.
You
Yeah,
have?
yeah.
Oh, fuck me. Well, I'm just,
No thanks.
yeah,
He's
really.
too busy getting some trim.
I'm not getting trim. That's the problem. That's why I didn't know what it was. What is it? Take old one eye out to the optometrist. I heard that. What the hell? Who comes up with this shit?
Drunk people.
Drunk people.
Drunk, bored people. High school kids.
I couldn't find any others. I don't know if you guys had come up
Oh
with
my
any.
God. I can't even think now.
Was it the optometrist one? Was
Yeah.
that what got it, dude?
Got me thinking about the doctor.
Oh man.
Yeah, I've heard of
Was he
horizontal
involved with a duck
polka
somehow?
and stuff. Yeah.
What was that? Horizontal what?
Horizontal polka or punching your ticket to Pound Town.
Pound Town,
Yeah.
dude.
But I've got a funny story on the balls deep one.
Okay. Excellent.
So I was on a rec softball team for a while, and one of my good buddies, everybody on the team had young kids and whatnot, and their wives would come out while we were playing. If somebody hit a home run, the wives and kids would yell "balls deep" in the crowd. This is a rec league.
The ball is going
beer
deep.
league. Yeah, balls deep, right?
Yes.
So my buddy gets up to bat at one point, and his little girl, she was probably about 4 years old at the time, runs up to the back of the backstop there, and she yells out real loud, "Go balls deep, Daddy!"
That's great. That is great.
Funniest shit ever.
That's great. Wow. Oh, man. I'd have been like, did you get my little girl saying that on video? Who's videotaping?
man.
Who's recording this?
It was pre-iPhone.
That's great. Well, guys, unless there's anything else to add to this one, I think we're going to leave
I think
it on.
after that, we might need to get out of here.
I'm saying, dude. I think we're gonna go balls deep and get the hell out of here. I like it. We're already off the deep end, so I might as well include the balls in it somewhere along those lines.
You just got to play with the balls, don't you?
I'm just playing with it, man. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Show notes and other info can be found at our website, greatdistraction.com. The Great Distraction is listed in iTunes, and we greatly appreciate it when our listeners take the time to look us up and leave us a 5-star rating and review. That helps our show grow and motivates us to continue producing content. If you'd like to get in contact with us, you can do so using the email address, greatdistractionpodcast@gmail.com, or via our website. We're always interested in hearing any thoughts, comments, or questions from our listeners. Keeping up on the latest from us can be done in several different ways. You can add us to your favorite RSS feed tracker. The link is available on our website or in iTunes. Or you can also follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search for Great Distraction, one word, no space. As always, thank you for listening, and thank you for all the support.